Okay, today we have a really great conversation. I'm so excited for people to meet Bryan Steele. Bryan, I have a fancy bio I'm going to read about you.
Please, use
So
all the flourishing words.
there's a few flourishes in here. Bryan Steele is the founder of Forge Podcast Co., a done-for-you podcast production company based in Wichita, Kansas, that specializes in helping service-based business founders transform their expertise into trust-building content. So he has a unique background that combines both aerospace engineering and a passion for audio production. And in that intersection, Bryan brings a technical precision to the art of podcasting. So before launching Forge Podcast Co., Bryan established himself in the audio world as the owner and operator of Forge Audio Productions, working on music recordings. His transition into podcast production began organically when friends sought his technical expertise to bring their shows to life, and this experience revealed a pattern that he wanted to address, that many business leaders and subject matter experts had valuable knowledge to share, but lacked the time or the technical know-how to execute a professional podcast. So now, Forge Podcast Company handles every aspect of podcast production, from the initial tech setup and recording to the editing, the transcription, the distribution, and the social media clips, allowing business owners across the country to focus entirely on creating compelling content and building their authority and shortening their sales cycles by building trust with their audience.
I think
That's
you
what
nailed it.
Bryan
Yeah,
does.
that sounds fantastic.
Did we nail it?
Yeah.
You're like, I sound better than ever. Okay. Awesome. So hi, Bryan.
Hi.
I actually, as I was reading this list, where was it? Tech setup, recording, editing, transcription, distribution. I was already like, wow, that's a lot.
Are you overwhelmed yet?
Yeah. And I think that seems to be the arc of it for me. A lot of people will be like, I could do a podcast. And then they begin to get overwhelmed, right, by this list of things when they realize how much is involved. But what do you think is maybe the biggest misconception that you run into that people have about what it takes to produce a podcast?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think people get into it assuming, oh, I sit down in front of a microphone and I talk and it comes out good on the other end. And certainly if you're a professional speaker and you go travel and give keynotes, lectures and things like that, maybe it does. But for the vast majority of us, we are not polished speakers. That's a giant reason why 70% of podcasts never make it past episode 10, I think, is the extra work that goes along with sitting in front of the microphone and talking for an extended period of time. It's the editing, it's the audio cleanup, it's making your final files, making your show notes, generating your transcript, and then having to continue to do that week after week after week.
That makes a lot of sense. So everything you were just talking about is, sort of all of this back-end production stuff that has to happen to make sure the podcast is of great quality, make sure it starts to reach its audience. But there's also some front-end work that you and I have talked about a lot. At Brand 3, we talk about people using a brand-first marketing strategy. To us, that's the way we address an absolute epidemic of wasted time and money on marketing. People just burn so many dollars and so many precious hours on initiatives that were probably never going to work because they weren't built on the right foundation. And that right foundation is brand strategy, which at the end of the day is really just about telling the right story to the right people. Making sure that who you are as a business aligns with the audience and the people who can really use your services most. And so podcasts are much the same. So I wonder what you have noticed in podcasts that haven't taken the time to essentially align their product or service, of the information they're sharing with their audience. What did they miss out?
I think a lot of times it's just not taking that initial step up front to understand, well, what is it I want this podcast to do for me? Am I trying to establish myself as a thought leader? Am I trying to warm up leads? Do I need content for my website? There needs to be a bit of an understanding right up front as to what the intended goal or objective of the podcast is. And then from there, you can decide, well, who's my audience? Who is that person I'm trying to speak to? So it has a lot to do with that initial brand framework, and that for your business, you're looking for that ideal client. You're looking for that person. So with a podcast, it's much the same thing. We're trying to find out who that ideal listener is. We're trying to identify them in as specific language as possible, because we want that person that when they come across a podcast or they're introduced to it, they almost feel like they are really spoken to, right? Man, this is for me. They are speaking directly to me about my experiences and my life and ways that I can grow and be changed. So really nailing those pieces down are critical to making sure you have something that people will gravitate towards and have success with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And okay, so we just talked about the back end of production. We were talking about the front end strategy. It just so happens that you and I have been working on a product to help with this. Do you want to tell people what it is?
Yeah.
I'll give you the first shot at it.
It was such a fun conversation, but we're calling it the podcast launch box. And the idea behind it is to give somebody who's an aspiring podcaster, wants to have a podcast to help build their business, they would get this package and we would collaborate together to identify that exact podcast that's right for them, to help them achieve their goals, to define their scripts for them, to give them their introductory music and their voiceovers and their graphics and all of the aspects that you think about, or maybe you don't think about, that come along with having a podcast, but absolutely have to be in place. Putting those all together in one package so that, like you were saying earlier, it's setting up somebody for the best chance for success with their podcast and achieving those goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I could have said it any better. It's I think of it in two big buckets, right? It's the foundation and making sure that they are strategically aligned with their audience, and then the other half of it is getting them over that hurdle, like you said earlier. And past that point of overwhelm of realizing how much is needed. Yeah, so it's really cool. We're excited about it. And the launch box, I mean, the idea is the launch box gives them everything they need to launch, right? They can take off and DIY, or if that ongoing administrative task, like you said, of producing it sounds unsavory or just not the priority at the moment, then you've got them. You've got a service.
Yeah, we can provide that help. And likewise, if they go, I need to promote this more. How do I promote it or get it out there in front of people more? That's something that Brand 3 can absolutely help with in an ongoing capacity. And, a big piece of that is understanding what else is out there in the marketplace. I think there's a fear that, oh, no, I don't have anything unique to offer. I don't have there's so many podcasts. There's no way that anybody will listen to mine. And I think the shocking thing is there's far fewer podcasts that are currently active than you realize. And so during this process, we would actually go look at the competitive landscape and go, hey, here's a way you think about the world that's unique from all these other podcasts and that would be attractive to your ideal listener. And if you lean on this, there's a real opportunity. And I think just being able to have some confidence that your idea is going to work, I think is really valuable.
I love that. People tend to undervalue how unique they really are. So first of all, I love the idea that there's still a space for them in that giant swath of, podcasts that show up on the search engine. Because we do that on the business side too. They tend to think there's a million of us out there who do this thing. And what we find time and time again is there is a unique heart and there is an audience for it. So yeah, it's so much the same. Okay, I want to make sure we capture what your service looks like for people, the done for you service and the ongoing productions.
I think about it in 3 phases. So your preparation, your production, and then your promotion are really the 3 phases. So the launch box really fulfills that first phase. That is the preparation. That is having your brand scripts together. That is having your introductory music, your graphics, your show description, all of those pieces pulled together to understand where your podcast is going to be, where it's going to be positioned, who it's going to be reaching. So that every episode you go plan and you think about, it's like, oh, here's the person I'm trying to help. And here's the transformation they're going to experience. That is the preparation phase of the podcasting. And that comes with the podcast launch box. Bonus, if you don't have a microphone, I'll send you a microphone. That's the great part about the launch box. Like, have a good mic. And then the second phase is the production. So you will have on-demand support for all of your recording of the episodes. So if it's something that, we're doing remotely, we've got platforms that are similar to Zoom allows everybody to connect. We can make sure you're getting a good audio feed and can coach you through that process of performing the interviews or hosting the episode if it's just you by yourself sharing your stories. Once you've got that, we take care of all the editing. So cleaning up the conversation, removing any awkward pauses, any retakes, filler words, and there's a lot of effort and time and care that goes into the editing process just to make sure that it really comes out very professional. And from there, we move to the last phase, which is the promotion. So we handle all of your distribution. So get it on Apple Podcasts, get it on Spotify, get it on YouTube, because you do need a YouTube strategy with your podcasts now. And so with those three things in place, we make sure that everything is out there. It's released on schedule. If you sign up for our social media content package, we will generate clips, those vertical reels, TikToks, however you want to look at them, but we'll make clips of those from every show to give to you so that you can put those on your social media feed to promote the new podcast episode. And then we give you an embeddable Meet web player, so HTML code, so you can put the podcast directly onto your website. And we provide an analytics portal so that as the podcast is going out, you're able to go look at real-time data. How are things going? How is the show performing? And get some perspective on where your listeners are from.
That's huge. That's so much support. And as I hear you talking about it, to me, it's like you'd have to have almost a team built to really do all this consistently. Because the two words that really popped for me when you were describing all of this is it coming out on schedule. Because I think that's the first thing when you try and do that in-house, as your own thing and just try and pull this off, that's the first thing that's going to slide is the schedule and the consistency, because you're going to have to put something else in priority ahead of it, some client meeting, something.
Yeah, there's actually an industry term for that. It's called pod fade. And so you start out and you're weekly for a few episodes because you've got all that energy and momentum, but eventually just the toll of all the production makes you miss a couple weeks, and then you're back on it for a bit longer. But then slowly over time, those gaps become longer and longer and longer until you just stop altogether. So eliminating pod fade for our clients is really mission number one. Make it as straightforward and seamless as possible so that you get to do the exciting parts and don't have to do the parts that you dread.
Every media you use to communicate with people is different, right? The written word and the blog, the social media versus video versus audio. It's underestimated what an intimate connection that is with people, that you're just sitting in their ear or talking to them. And what difference have you seen that make in terms of thought leadership and authority building?
Yeah, I think podcasting as a trust engine almost is very powerful because it's really the only content platform where you can command somebody's attention for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. If you're Joe Rogan, you can get people for 3 hours, right? There's not any other content where you can get that sort of time with somebody. They get a sense of who you are as a person, your values, your personality, and really have a lot of clarity on what it's going to be like to work with you in a way that shortens your sales cycles more than I think any other platform or content creation really can. You sit down for your first call with them and it's like, yeah, I already know who you are and I want to work with you. So let's go.
You're right. That's what's so hard to capture in a blog. A blog will give all this great information, but meeting the person behind it could just change everything. What do you tell the business owner who thinks, I don't know if I know enough to talk for 20 minutes at a time or an hour at a time? I don't know if I'm expert enough.
If you understand your listeners' pain, their struggles, then you have the opportunity then to speak hope or transformation into their lives in a way that's meaningful.
Man, that's wonderful. And I love how you said that. And my mind also goes to the idea that people maybe don't know they have the freedom to forge their podcast however they like, right? Like the length is up to you. The format's up to you.
There's no such thing as too long or too short, only too boring.
Let's look at some of the impact of it, because you've used a phrase on your website and even in this conversation that sounds pretty exciting to people and might surprise them about a podcast, that they can shorten a sales cycle. So I wonder if you can explain how that works.
Yeah. So a lot of times a service-based business, especially those that have higher ticket offers, it takes a significant amount of time before somebody has moved from the point of meeting you and understanding how you can help them to the point where they trust you enough to make that decision to work with you. And so a podcast becomes really powerful as a platform for doing that for you without you being present in the room. One of my favorite stories ever is I have a client who I do her podcast, and she had been only podcasting for a few episodes. I think we had done 5 or 6 episodes, not many, right? We were just getting off the ground. She had put some information on her website about the podcast. And so a lead came along, found her website, saw what she offered, scheduled that first initial call with her. They talked, normal introductory discovery call, nothing abnormal. What the podcast did was after that call, see, that lead found her podcast, listened to all of the episodes, and then on the next call had committed to working with her, right? At that point, all of that legwork of conversation after conversation to understand her perspective, how she thought about the challenges they were facing, it was already there. It was there in the podcast. So it took what would normally be like a 6 meeting type close cycle and did it in 2.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's cool. But that's a lot of relationship. That's a lot of time spent getting to know someone.
Yeah, that was easily 4 to 5 hours of content listening to them. And it's out there doing its work. And so even if you don't have, thousands upon thousands of listeners, if that content is there on your website and it can answer key questions, then it's taking some of the struggle out of your normal sales cycle. It's doing some work for you.
That's awesome. We always say that about marketing in general, and good brand messaging does, builds trust right up front. But you can't replace the hour spent on a podcast by first visit to a homepage. It's just really powerful. Okay. For anyone out there who wants to know more about Forge Podcast, wants to connect with you about getting some help with this, what's their next best step?
So the best place is to go to forgepodcast.co, and there are buttons everywhere that say to book a call with me for a podcast vision discussion. So you can jump on a call with me. We can talk about what it looks like to have a podcast, what it would look like for you to work with me and my team, and what it would look like to get a podcast launch box.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's it. Thanks, Bryan.